Hey guys, welcome to the Daily Word Bible Study, a plain and simple, book by book, chapter by chapter, and verse by verse study through the entire Bible. We are in Jeremiah 21. We are laying a foundation because of, of why prophecy is important. Why prophecy is important to our faith. It strengthens our faith. And the reason why I am taking this little excursion before I actually get into chapter 25, because it's an important prophecy to me that is foundational. And it shows how God is faithful to his word. So like right now, we're being challenged right now. If I wanted to say, and I'm not saying this is just my thoughts, okay? So I'm not saying the Bible actually says this. And I'm saying that as I'm reading, these are some of the thoughts that I'm formulating as I read. The Bible talks about an apostasy coming, that it has to happen before the man of sin is revealed. Some people, of course, refer to him as the Antichrist. I think it is possible that we're seeing the seeds of that now, where people are questioning the Bible, people are questioning faith, and even with Christianity, many Christians, if you was to test them in terms of and say, why do you believe what you believe? They cannot give you intelligent answers. In other words, I believe because I just believe. And that's dangerous because what has happened is we have filled churches with people with that kind of faith. And then we are kind of amazed when they backslide or apostatize, right? They leave the faith. Now the reality is that then they really never had true faith. I remember talking to my son who was raised in the church. He was raised evangelical. And when he got an adult, I remember asking him, I said, "Well, do you believe in Jesus?" He said, "Well, I believe what you taught me." That was sobering. He said, "I believe what you taught me." So of course my prayer is that Lord, you give him a heart to know you. Give him a heart to know you. And that is the case with a lot of people. Now, the deception kind of is that we fill people with, hey, just join our church. Just join our church, right? And then, of course, with the advent of the mega church, the shows are spectacular, right? What's his name? Ringling Barley, whatever. I don't know, I butchered his name. He would be impressed with some of the shows that the mega churches put to bring people in, right? And now they've gone from bad to worse for light shows and twerking and all kinds of stuff going on, right? And and again, there's more cynical reasons for that, uh, but it started off. Remember, the Catholics have been doing this forever, though. I can tell you. I remember when there were a lot of Catholics, and you go back to the '70s. And the reason why I said it, you go back to the '70s and you contrast Catholic doctrine with, let's say, Pentecostal doctrine, Pentecostal holiness doctrine. So the Pentecostal holiness people, you could not wear pants, jewelry, and makeup. Now you have to understand something. They really kind of railed against the fashion of the day. Fashions are very friendly to holiness people today because you could dress nice and still look holy according to them. But back then it was obvious, the flashy dress. Oh, the big afros, okay. Mini skirts, okay. They was like, you're not holy. But what happened is that some people then would jump ship. They would, leave the holiness church and go to the Catholic church. Why? Because in the Catholic church, you can drink wine, you can smoke, you can dance. The Friday night fish fries. Okay. And then, of course, hey, guess what? I can go to church on Saturdays and watch the game on Sundays. So my point is we filled people with just a religious aspect. In other words, it's just, if I do this, check, 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 I'm good to go. I've met the requirements. So the point is that when people have true faith, then you say, well, why do you really believe? Now, there's a lot of people that believe. I'm not the judge. I'm not the judge to say who has true faith and not. I'm just presenting the scenario, and I also encourage you not to try to attach something to someone that only God can do that. God knows the heart. But I am saying this, that when we read the Bible, there, and just we don't have to just rely on the fact that I believe something because I was told it. So, for example, take the story of the resurrection. Now, understand, Jesus had been telling his disciples, amplifying that just the few months before, telling them, hey, Son of Man is going to be handed over to the Gentiles. They're going to crucify him, and he's going to be dead. And after 3 days, he's going to rise. They're kind of like, yeah, Jesus. Yeah. But when it happened, they were kind of like, we don't know what happened. Wow, we just don't know what happened. Well, when Jesus appeared to them, you know what's interesting? You know what he did? He appeared to them and said, look at my hands. And you saw the nail prints. Look at my side. You saw where the spear was pierced. He showed them that. Right? That was evidence of what he said. It's me, the real Jesus, not a phantom, not a ghost, not an aberration. Real flesh and bone. He even said, give me some fish. And he chowed down with them with some fish. Broiled, I might add. Okay? Right? Kind of gives us a glimpse of our heavenly bodies to come. We'll be able to enjoy the cuisines. Okay? All right, I admit I'm lusting after Dairy Queen, but I digress. But the point that he established, that it wasn't just, well, Jesus rose from the dead. No, he appeared. He showed himself, and then also demonstrated that it wasn't just a figment of their imagination. It was real flesh and bone, minus the blood, but flesh and bone. Showed the signs. Okay. Now we kind of go back. You could go back and you could say, well, wait a minute, didn't Jesus already tell you about that this would happen? Did he tell you he was going to rise? So they had all of this now as an arsenal for their faith. All of this as an arsenal for their faith. That they were able to establish, hey, this prophecy, going all the way back to Isaiah 53, Jonah, the story of Jonah, to Jesus himself telling, so they should have believed, but they didn't. But now they also have, in addition, that, hey, the prophecy came to pass. Our faith is strengthened by what we have seen and heard. So now they tell us this story, and we believe what we believe. Yes, we believe men. We believe the story of men. I don't believe the Catholics, because the Catholics have corrupted God's word by throwing in Mary, the saints, and all this other crap. The Eastern Orthodox, all these other organized religion have corrupted the story. They corrupted the story. But here's the thing, they have the Bible itself. So if you, as a Catholic, read the Bible, you would be challenged with, I'm reading the actual scriptures that the Catholics themselves say is the scriptures. But yet at the same time, you would read that they are corrupted. They have corrupted their own scriptures. Okay. But that's the thing that separates us too. I'll say that when people say to me, and they do challenge me, sometimes I do get into discussions with atheists. I get into discussions with agnostic and all kinds of people, right? As social media, now being on social media teaching, then it does bring me into contact with them. And some of the discussions are interesting, but they'll say, well, why are you different than Mithra? Now, there's a story of Mithra, of this person who was a deity-like person who supposedly is like Jesus. preached the gospel, had 12 apostles, and supposedly died and rose again the third day, right? And by the way, supposedly, I think Mithra, I think it's him, also was reported to work miracles. Well, here's the difference between Mithra and Jesus, and this is why I say this is important. One, the stories that people oftentimes say about Mithra are not necessarily what the stories say. In other words, if you go back and you actually read the stories about Mithra, they don't say what people. Now, there are people who are using Mithra to try to discredit the Bible. That's all it is, okay? But some of the stories are true in terms of this deity-like figure. But when you go back and you read some of the details of it, it's like nowhere close, nowhere close. Secondly, they were just that. They were stories. But no one said that these stories were actually true, based upon a true figure. Now, unlike with Jesus, you have a true figure with real events. You can place them in real events. Another thing is too, let me say this, that when you talk about then like the apostles, right? The apostles, when you talk about the apostles, that nowhere were the apostles established as liars, as fraud. Now, so if I read the Catholic Church, you can say, well, there's a lot of fraud and all kinds of stuff going on with the Catholic Church. History records that. History records a lot of these fake apostles, faith healers, and all that they're frauds, they're showmen. You can read that and say, okay, come on, like, 100 years from now, you may be able to read back and go, these guys are clearly were frauds. Every one of them, okay? But when you look at the writings of the apostles, so the very foundation of the apostles, nowhere in history where you can say, people said these guys were frauds. The Pharisees tried to say that. One of the reasons why they posted guards at Jesus' tomb to say, well, just in case, he on the third day, they take his body and they steal it and they're going to say he rose from the dead. But no one believed that. Pilate didn't believe it. The people who said, well, the empty tomb, they didn't believe it. They just said, you know what? They bribed the soldiers, right, to say that. But of course, you had at one point Jesus appearing to 500 different people. And the stories that they told, the gospel that they told, nowhere did it say that the men that were telling the gospel, the men that were telling the stories were fraud. Okay? So that's always the difference. Now we kind of go back to then what the prophecies are. And I said from a timeline perspective, and before I go there, let me go back to my little picture because I do want to show you something in terms of what is one of the greatest things for us to strengthen our faith. Okay, what strengthens our faith. And by the way, it's not reasoning that does it. I love apologetics. I do. I wish I had that kind of mind. It takes me. I have the luxury. I have the luxury when I do reaction videos. Okay, I have the luxury of studying them. But if I had to be confronted on the fly, that might be a little difficult. I mean, I have enough information now that usually, like, if someone was to want to challenge me on one of my videos or my positions, I have enough, information now kind of programmed in here. But the difference between me and like some of the apologetics, when I think about some of the apologetics, like James White, okay, I disagree with his Calvinism, but great apologist, a thinker, that on the fly he can just pop out stuff, right? Jeff Dubin, and then other apologists that I'm just, but other apologists that, man, when you get them on a stage with anybody else, atheists, whoever, right? They can just start popping out stuff. Me, I wouldn't do as well. Okay, I wouldn't do as well. Um, so, but in this here, the reason why I wanted to kind of show this picture right here. Now I said in that we're from a prophetic perspective here, as we are in Jeremiah 25. When it talks about the head of gold, so if you stop and say, right now, you would be able, if you lived during that time, if you were one of the saints, the people of God during that time, you are able to say, here's where we are prophetically. Now, you can also go back, and I showed you a chart um, that an approximate dating of the different books of the Bible and certain events in the Bible. So, for example, you could say Amos prophesied about this event 200 years before it happened. Then we come to Isaiah, who about 120 years before this event happened, prophesied. God said, I'm going to bring disaster from the north. He speaks this about 120 years before. Jeremiah shows up about 23 years before this happened and begins to say, God told you he's going to bring it and it's going to happen. And now, as we are in chapter 25, we're in the midst of Nebuchadnezzar has showed up and he has surrounded the city, and he's already started deporting some of the people of Jerusalem. By the way, Daniel the prophet is one of them. I believe Daniel, and you can also probably say Ezekiel is one of them who has been deported to Babylon. So we can say right there, this is where we are prophetically in the timeline. So then you go about 70 years, and we're in the Mede and Persian, the Persian Empire. And you could say this is where we are prophetically. Now, we're going to study, not in this lesson, but next time, next time or the session after this, where Jeremiah prophesies 70-year exile, and that puts us in the Persian Empire, which unveils, and in this image that we see here, that prophet is given of this image is fulfilled, where he says, when Cyrus issues the decree, right here you see it. Well, let's skip on. If you go on and with the dyes of brass, the Grecian Empire, you see that again this prophecy about Alexander the Great, his kingdom being split into 4 generals. Then we come to Rome. Now this is kind of interesting because we see Rome. Now Rome lasts a pretty long time. Okay, if you think about it, from 100, almost about 500 years, Rome reigns. But which kind of, anyway, Rome lasts. But here, this is where we find Jesus, and I'm going to get into this more. But we see this prophecy about right now. If you look at Rome, we could chart ourselves prophetically from the 70 weeks of Daniel, and that right now we are between week 69 and week 70. Now, the 70th week of Daniel has not started yet, has not begun, and I'll get into that later because I ran out of time here, but the 70 weeks of Daniel have not started, and that brings us to the feet in iron of clay, which talks about the divided nations of the Western Europe. I don't know if they're necessarily Western Europe, but it's the 10 toes represent 10 different kingdoms. Then in the second chapter of Daniel, Nebuchadnezzar is told, Daniel tells him, in the days of these kings, Jesus will set up a kingdom that will never end. So prophetically, we know we're not there yet. And because there are some details about that time, that prophecy, where we know that hasn't happened yet. But we can say, okay, from as far as Rome is concerned, that is come and gone. Jesus was cut off. I'll get more into that later, but this is why I'm saying that the idea of the strengthening of these prophecies, the fact that these have already come to pass, is why we can say our faith is strong. One of the pillars of our foundation is right here. I can look at fulfilled prophecy that God spoke these things hundreds of years before they happen. All right, guys. Don't forget to like and share this video and subscribe to BP, the Bible Perspective. And as always, if you have a thought, a comment, add it to the comment section below. All comments are welcome. And I will see you in the next study.